Ugh, can you move any slower? Some of us have places to be. Linda Parker winced as she fumbled with the groceries, struggling to load them into her rusted old car. The sharp voice belonged to Margaret Thornton, her wealthy and notoriously judgmental next-door neighbor. Standing there in her designer dress and high heels, Margaret crossed her arms, watching with a smirk. "It's honestly embarrassing," Margaret continued, rolling her eyes. "Every time I see you, you're either working some low-end job or dragging those kids around looking exhausted. Seriously, Linda, get your life together. Maybe if your husband hadn't run off, you wouldn't be in this mess." Linda stiffened, gripping the grocery bag so hard her knuckles turned white. She wasn't going to give Margaret the satisfaction of seeing her break. If only she knew the truth. Margaret's laughter rang through the parking lot. Or wait, was it that he realized he made a mistake marrying someone like you? A hush fell over the small crowd of onlookers. Linda swallowed back the lump in her throat, forcing a calm tone. "Margaret, you don't know anything about my life." Margaret scoffed. "Oh, but I do. You're broke, struggling, and completely alone. And honestly, it's pathetic." Little did she know, Linda wasn't as pathetic as she thought. She had a secret, a big one. And soon, Margaret was about to find out exactly who Linda was married to. As Margaret walked away with an air of superiority, a few other women from the neighborhood exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had heard her insults loud and clear, but no one dared to speak up. Linda sighed, finishing up with the groceries, before turning to her two kids, Emily, 8, and Jake, 5, who had witnessed everything. "Mommy, why was that lady so mean to you?" Emily asked, eyes wide with concern. Linda forced a smile. "Some people judge others without knowing their story, sweetheart. But that doesn't make them right." Margaret, now surrounded by a small group of wealthy housewives, spoke just loudly enough for Linda to hear. "Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she's on food stamps. I mean, look at that car. One strong wind and it'll fall apart." The women chuckled, though some of them shifted uncomfortably. Linda took a deep breath. She had dealt with Margaret's cruelty before, but today's comments stung more than usual. The reason? Because today, she had been waiting for a very special phone call, a call that would change everything. As she loaded her last bag, her phone buzzed. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the name on the screen. It was him. She answered quickly, stepping away from the gossiping neighbors. "Hey, are you almost home?" The deep, confident voice on the other end made her tense shoulders relax. "Yes, love. I'll be there soon. Can't wait to see you." She smiled. "Neither can I." If Margaret only knew who was coming to pick her up. Later that evening, Linda was setting the dinner table when her phone buzzed again. This time with a text from Margaret. "Margaret, hey, struggling mom. Since you never go anywhere nice, I thought I'd be generous. I'm hosting an elegant dinner party tomorrow night. Why don't you come? Maybe you'll learn a thing or two about class." Linda read the text twice. A setup. Margaret didn't invite her out of kindness. She wanted to humiliate her. Before she could reply, another text came through. Margaret: "Oh, and don't worry about bringing a date. I doubt you have one." Linda smirked. If only Margaret knew. She typed back, "I'll be there, and I won't be alone." Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. The following evening, Margaret's mansion was alive with laughter, expensive wine, and the clinking of crystal glasses. Everything about the party screamed wealth. From the golden chandeliers to the catered five-course meal, it was clear that this was an event meant to show off. Margaret was in her element, swirling her wine as she whispered to a group of guests, "I can't wait to see what embarrassing outfit Linda shows up in. She probably doesn't even own a dress fit for an event like this." The women chuckled, but before they could continue, the grand doors swung open. Every head turned. The room fell silent. Linda stepped in, but she wasn't alone. Her husband walked beside her, tall, confident, and instantly recognizable. The men in the room stiffened. The women gasped. And Margaret? She choked on her wine. Because standing next to Linda was none other than Jack Winters, the billionaire, the business tycoon, the man who had built an empire from the ground up. And most importantly, Linda's husband. Margaret's face drained of color. She had spent months mocking Linda, treating her like a nobody. Without realizing, Linda was married to one of the most powerful men in the country. The whispers spread like wildfire. "That's Jack Winters, the billionaire? Wait, Linda is his wife." Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Jack's sharp eyes locked onto her. "You must be Margaret." His tone was casual, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Margaret swallowed hard, suddenly feeling very small. "Linda?" She just smiled. "Margaret, you wanted me to learn about class?" she said sweetly. "I think I just did." Margaret's lips trembled as she forced a smile, but her eyes darted around in panic. I had no idea you were married to Mr. Winters." Jack's expression remained unreadable, but his voice carried authority. "And why would that matter?" The room was dead silent. The guests were holding their breath. Margaret stammered, I assumed that because my wife doesn't parade her wealth, she's beneath you?" Jack interrupted smoothly, tilting his head. "That's an interesting perspective." Margaret let out a nervous laugh, desperately trying to save face. "Oh, no. I was only trying to help Linda fit in." Linda folded her arms, amusement twinkling in her eyes. "Oh, don't worry, Margaret. I think I fit in just fine." Jack stepped closer, his powerful presence making Margaret shrink back. "You see, my wife and I don't measure people by their money, their clothes, or their status. But you do, don't you?" Margaret gulped. "It was all just friendly banter." Jack gave a humorless chuckle. "Friendly banter?" He turned to the crowd. "Tell me, did it sound friendly to anyone else?" The guests shifted awkwardly, shaking their heads. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of a billionaire. Linda smirked. "Don't worry, Margaret. I'm not upset. After all, you only taught me a valuable lesson." Margaret's eyes widened with false hope. Yes?" Linda leaned in. "That class isn't about money. It's about character. And yours? Well, let's just say it's a little bankrupt." A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Margaret's face burned red. Then, as if on cue, Jack wrapped an arm around Linda's waist. "Shall we go, darling? I think we've made our presence known." Margaret could only watch in humiliated silence as the power couple turned and walked away, heads high, leaving her to drown in her own shame. And that night, Margaret learned a lesson she would never forget.